You are listening to the Business Talk, a podcast where global voices in business, academia, and leadership come together to spark meaningful conversations. I'm Deepak, joining you from India. Today, we are honored to host Dr. Caroline Levander, joining us as our distinguished guest on the podcast to share her insights and experience. Dr. Caroline served as a Vice President for Global Strategy, Carlson Professor in the Humanities, and Professor of English at Rice University. An award-winning scholar and author of several acclaimed books on education, literature, and culture. Her work explores transnationalism, race, gender, and the future of education. At Rice University, she leads initiatives that expand the university's global presence, including the Paris Center, Rice Global India, and Rice Online Learning. Beyond Rice University, Dr. Levander has served in influential leadership roles across higher education, including on the Coursera Council, the edX Advisory Council, the Fulbright Association Board of Directors as a chair, and the Board of Trustees of Venice International University. She also co-founded an edtech company in 2020 that was acquired by Honor Education in 2022, where she now serves as a senior advisor, helping bring Apple-level design and engineering excellence to digital teaching and learning tools. In today's conversation, Dr. Caroline Levander shares insights from her book, Invent Ed, how an American tradition of innovation can transform college today. Let's not keep you waiting. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Caroline Levander to the conversation. Professor Caroline, we are deeply honored by your presence and grateful for your time with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here and to speak to your audience about ideas and looking forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor, your book argues that American inventors from Benjamin Franklin to Steve Jobs combine existing ideas in unexpected ways to change the world. How can today's colleges build this inventive habit into everyday student life rather than isolating in special programs or innovation labs?
Thank you so much for that question. And I think we are all as a world right now confronting large transformations in how we do work, particularly in light of AI-enabled workplaces across all industries. And so this is really a question for all of us right now. How can we optimize our most creative selves so that we can make discoveries, we can use new tools in unorthodox ways in order to better our world, to better our career satisfaction. And universities play a very important role in this because we are the places that are the most rich ecosystems of ideas. Universities bring together the collected wisdom of the ages. And so in all of our different departments and our faculty, we are a concentration of the world's wisdom. And that wisdom is highly diverse. So the work I do is very different from the work that my electrical and computational engineering faculty friends do. And yet when we have conversations and we put our ideas together, the light goes off, right? So we suddenly see our own subjects in new ways. And that's the kind of work we need to commit to as university leaders around the world. It doesn't matter if you are at a MIT, Massachusetts, Industry for Technology, or or an IIT. The opportunities for creativity are vast, and we need to lean into that in the education we provide our students.
Professor, you describe an American method of invention that helped make the nation as a global power. What are the one or two core elements of that method you believe are currently missing from most campus classrooms?
Thank you for that. And, the book focuses on the past in the United States in order to learn important elements we can bring into our future. And so while I focus on a US context, it's relevant in other parts of the world as well. If we remember that back at the very beginning when colonists came to the US, there were not a lot of universities. In fact, there really weren't any. And there was a vast amount of territory. And so our first inhabitants had to think differently to solve the problems they were surrounded with. And so universities weren't initially the places that, you know, the founding fathers went to get great ideas to solve problems. They had to do it with, you know, the tools at hand, the tools they found in the frontier. And so it's that legacy that built a creative tradition in a US context. Certainly in other contexts, the same can well be true. You know, India as well is a place where higher education at scale has come later in your history. And so I see potentially a lot of parallels between the history of US higher education and the history of Indian higher education. That's a fascinating topic separate from the question you ask. But I think what happened in a US context is as universities were founded, they tended to want to replicate the structures that our leaders found in Europe, because European universities were many centuries older. They had established practices and methods and protocols. And in a German context, disciplinary rigor was very important. And so US universities brought sort of the rigor of disciplines into our universities in the US. And so today we have a very specialized campus. You know, there are, you know, well over 60 different disciplines that undergraduates can major in at Rice University, and we are not unique in this regard. And so knowledge, even at the undergraduate level, is very specialized. There are about 1,000 different classes in any given semester that our students can take. And those classes are in literature, history, anthropology, you know, computational sciences. And of those 1,000, our students can only pick 5 courses. And so in that environment, students are really learning just small sections of the full set of offerings. And so universities, I think, in the US need to help students think across their major to other far-flung disciplines in order to learn not only competence in their major or their field, but also to bring different perspectives to that field of study so that they can develop a creative mindset.
Professor, many colleges talk about innovation, but are constrained by regulation, rankings, and risk aversion. In Invented, what concrete practices do you suggest that leaders can adopt tomorrow without waiting for policy or accreditation changes?
Thank you. You're asking really spot on questions. I appreciate that. And one of the arguments that Invent Ed makes is that innovation is a word that is too commonly used. Everything is innovative, and therefore often nothing is really innovative. Certainly on college campuses, you will see a proliferation of innovation centers or innovation programs. And this is an effort that university leaders have made to speed innovation on our campuses without having to slow down for all of the regulatory requirements or changes to the curriculum that our faculty senates need to approve. And so I applaud the desire for speed and the minimization of regulation. I think that encourages creative risk-taking. I do think, however, it has let universities off the hook for thinking just very practically about what kinds of new programs that cost no money can we introduce that would help our students build an innovative mindset. And it can be as simple, as simple as challenging our students to keep a notebook of, every day, what is the most unusual, strange, surprising thing you learned today? That costs no money. That takes very little time, but it builds creative muscle in our students to think outside their discipline. Often we think in higher education, we have to have a lot of money to start a fancy new building with a, hire a fancy director, and that's great. I mean, it's wonderful for those who have those resources. That said, innovation is radically democratic. It does not cost money. It takes a commitment and an intention at every level, including the intention of our students.
Professor, after tracing the forgotten history of invention in America, what surprised you most in connecting that history to how our colleges rose to global prominence? And how should that insight reshape institutional strategy today?
Yeah, thank you. I am trained, my discipline is as a cultural historian. And so it was really fun to begin this book about the future of creativity back in the 1700s. I love doing that. And, the thing that I found, of course, was that some of the inventors that we think of as scientific inventors, we think of maybe Samuel Morse, who developed the telegraph and Morse code. We think of him as a scientist. We don't remember that he was a painter. He held the first position as an art professor in the history of U.S. higher education. And so we might ask ourselves, well, why was he a painter and how did he become such a scientific inventor? And, the story is that the principles, the skills he learned as a painter helped him see what other people could not see. And so he actually used his studio, his art studio, to build the first telegraph. So there's wonderful stories like that in our past. And what that means for universities today is sort of challenging because we have art studios on our campuses, and we have, art professors who teach art. And, we have engineering design programs on our campus where we have engineering professors teaching the principles of design, but we don't have those two laboratory spaces coming together in the way they came together for a Samuel Morse. And so the more that we can think about those spaces on our campus, not as separate, not as disconnected, but as potentially very synergistic, the better off we'll be. That is taking existing tools that we currently have, but putting them into new combinations. So might we start an arts engineering program where students who are engineering focused are encouraged to take a couple of arts courses. And conversely, right, students who are really focused on visual arts really need to take some engineering courses and maybe even bring those students together around a common problem and ask them to work as teams to solve the problem. The more we can do that kind of work within our existing university structures, I think the better off all universities will be and our national economies as a result.
Professor, your book speaks directly to industry leaders, regulators, and parents. Where do you see the biggest misalignment between what each of these groups expect from college and what an innovation-driven model of higher education actually requires?
So that's a great, you're getting an A+ in all your questions. Thank you. So in a US context, and the work I do around the world suggests we are not unique, but there is so much emphasis on which college your child is accepted in, right? And so it's all about what is the most strong institutional brand that, and so all the effort is on your child getting into the globally top ranked universities. And, if we step back for a moment and we think about the importance of this investment in a young person's life, it is, 4 years of a person's life. It is where the wisdom and competence that will support a career-long, contribution to the economy takes place. I am shocked at how little people pay attention to what is beneath the brand. So in the US, people go on these college tours, right? They get the campus tour, they talk to a couple of students, and the families say, oh, we must, our top choice is name your college. And they don't spend any time actually looking at some very important indicators of how that university functions. So there are simple things that people can do. Looking at the student newspaper, reading the student newspaper, looking at the faculty senate meeting notes, right, with the minutes of those meetings, looking at the publicly available documents, paying attention to what are the biggest worries and hopes of that institution right now. And those kinds of, brief assignments will really help families understand the investment they're making better. And it may be that the most, illustrious ranked institution is not the best one for your child. And that is an incredibly important thing to discern, because there's a lot of kids that end up at great universities and have no idea actually how to navigate those universities, how they're going to get the most out of the experience, right? They just go and think, I'll graduate with a degree from X school and it'll set me up for life. And what we know is that with the really radical transformations in the workforce, that is absolutely not true. I personally would rather hire, and I hire a lot of people, I don't pay attention to the university that, job applicants have graduated from. I pay attention to their cover letter, how they talk about themselves, how they can, can I really believe this person is going to really work with me, in an active, thoughtful, and creative way. Those are the things that employers want. And so when we now move from the family to, employers, we are seeing a global workforce that is short on creative employees. And that is World Economic Forum ranks creativity as the most in-demand skill across industries today. And that will only increase as AI integrates into different industries. And so, there's a disconnect in universities' minds between what we need to do for our students and what the workforce says they want. And so it used to be the case that all students with a computer science, degree thought they were set for life. What we've seen is actually now the computer science degree is not the golden ticket. And so that tells us that students and universities and government political leaders need to focus less on the major and more on the skill set that students are coming out with. And so that is, I think, across the board, an update to our database we need to make. In a US context, of course, politicians are, in my opinion, focusing on the wrong things. They are focusing on political divides on campuses. They overstate those divides. They are not focusing on how universities are the engines of national economic prosperity. We generate the largest number of new startups. We identify and create new industries. People often ask me, how has AI affected universities? I have to say, let's remember, universities have developed the research that has generated AI. So, we need to remember that we create all kinds of new pharmaceutical inventions, bioscience inventions, tech inventions, to name just a few. And so I think there across the board are some misconceptions that are causing families not to get the most out of colleges, employers to be frustrated, politicians to get it wrong, and university leaders to be valuing the wrong things.
Dr. Caroline, your book offers guidance on renewing US higher education to ensure the nation's ongoing vitality. If a president asks you for a 3 to 5 year innovation roadmap for their institution, what would be a non-negotiable pillars on that roadmap?
So I would say over the next 3 to 5 years, my institution, any institution, needs to take a new look at what we are currently offering our undergraduate students and identify ways, and each university is different. Each university has its own strengths, its own challenges, its own context. So regardless of where an institution is, I would say to really take a look, hard look, how can we integrate creative mindset building into all of our offerings, no matter what the discipline is. And Invent Ed offers people, who lead universities, faculty, people like me, some very, very simple ways that we can do that in our classrooms, that we can do that outside of our classrooms, and that we can do that in a way that really positions all students, regardless of their major, to be more AI proof as they enter the workforce. So that is something we can do in 3 to 5 years. We do not need legislative changes. We do not need a big gift from a donor. There's nothing stopping us from doing that work. And so I think we all need to be doing that work if we want to survive. I would also say we can do all that work. If students don't meet us halfway, we won't be successful. And too many students today in the US are passive, too obedient, focused on just getting the highest grade possible with very little interest and curiosity in the work they do. And if we have those students in our classes, anything we do will not be as effective as if we have students who have a little more courage, are willing to see that risk-taking is part of life, including university life, and that guess what? Employers aren't going to be all upset if you don't have perfect grades. They will be upset with job applicants if they are lackluster, if they don't have smart answers to questions, if they do not look like they are ready to embrace an AI-driven world.
Professor, looking across the examples in the book, what is one story of a college program or student that best capture how an inventive approach to learning can change both individual trajectories and institutional culture?
So Invent Ed does offer some examples where this is happening. I'm not trying to suggest this is not happening anywhere. What I am arguing in Invent Ed is that it has not happened in an intentional way across universities. So there are some wonderful examples. And again, these are places that you might not necessarily think of as leaders, but I would point out one example that we all know, and that is MIT. And so, the Institute for Technology in many decades ago did a report, why are our engineers not as creative as we would like them to be, and what can we do to support that? And what MIT found, and this was, back 30, 40 years ago, is that they were producing students who were not as curiosity driven as they wanted them to be. And so the conclusion of this report was to require more students, engineering students, to take humanities courses. And what you see on the MIT campus today is a really healthy and dynamic undergraduate curriculum. You see, even though, it's an engineering focused campus, you see things like the MIT Media Lab, which is a radically multidisciplinary incubator for startups, for experimentation. You see things like the MIT Press, and I published with MIT Press because I really like the way that press thinks about the books they publish. They don't just publish books that they think are smart, they publish books that they believe transform industries. And so that commitment is evident. You see it evident in the undergraduate student body. Yes, the vast majority are majoring in engineering or, sciences, of course. Over 80% of their students have a global educational experience while they're undergraduates. They don't just sit, in Cambridge, Mass, in their lab doing their work. They're out in the world grappling with problems in Malawi, problems in, you name it, any part of the world, bringing those problems into their problem set in Massachusetts. And those global immersion programs, I think, are another way that the university has committed to building creativity in all their undergraduates.
Professor, you frame the book as part of the broad ecosystem of innovation, creativity, and higher education. How should colleges partner differently with employers, cities, and communities if they truly embrace the invention mindset you outline in the Invent Ed?
So I thank you for that question. I think that much too often universities, we're so focused on building competence in our students. We only have 4 years. We need to transform them into competent computer scientists, data scientists, mechanical engineers, you name it. And that is a challenge. And so we have focused on the fundamentals, which are so important. So I would never suggest that we give up on that. We have to produce competent students or we're not doing our job. That said, we have not optimized the opportunities to work with industry, to think, regardless of industry, what are the problems, what are your pain points? Bring us your problems and let's think about how we can reverse engineer learning to provide solutions to those problems. And that is something that I think every institution can do. There's a lot of problems right outside of our university door. We don't have to go far to look for them. There's a lot of companies that have been created explicitly to solve problems. And so, the ability to bring those two together provides huge upside for our students. One of the upsides is, regardless of whether the student gets hired by that company, the student learns how to solve a problem in the workplace. And that is exactly what employers want to know an applicant can do. And so I think we serve our students much better if we can introduce that into the undergraduate experience. I know it's a challenge, but it's essential. It's a mandatory. It's not a nice to have, it's a gotta have for our students. And the more that we can understand that, the better off everyone will be.
Professor, before we wrap up, one final question. If we sit down 10 years from now and Invent Ed had done exactly what you hope and what you have written, what would we feel fundamentally different about the American college experience? For students in the classroom, for faculty designing curriculum, and for the public evaluating the value of a degree?
Thank you. It's a great final question. For students in the classroom, I would hope that students are less obedient, that they are more willing to take chances and fail fast. We know that failing fast is the principle of startups. And so we need students to be willing to fail fast. And faculty need to lean into that mentality. And build university classrooms that encourage a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. And Invent Ed talks about ways we can all do that as faculty. And then I would say, the biggest dream for me is if we're doing all that, regardless of what kind of institution you're at, whether it's a 2-year college, or elite university, everything in between, we all join arms as a university network, and we make clear to our public the value of what we're doing so that the public and our government leaders see us as the incubator of industry transforming ideas and competencies. And that is something we are already doing. Invent Ed argues that we have not done it as intentionally as we might, but this is a change we can make within our institutions, and then as a collection, as an industry, really deliver that message to the public. And I think if we do that, we will realize the ambition of higher education in the US over the last 100 years. We're so close to getting it right. We're at a crossroads. If we do not get it right now, it'll be hard, if not impossible, to come back from that failure, which is why I published this book now. My hope would also be that other countries would learn from the story of U.S. higher education. And, for so long, those around the world have looked to U.S. higher education as an example and often as a destination. And my hope would be that we provide a model for future-proofing education that would be relevant, for everyone.
Thank you, Professor Caroline, for a truly insightful and inspiring conversation today. Your ideas have not only deepened our understanding, but also challenged us to rethink how we learn, teach, and lead. As we leave this episode, I hope we carry forward your message into our classrooms, institutions, and daily decisions so that today's conversation becomes tomorrow's practice. On behalf of Business Talk, thank you once again for your time, your generosity, and your vision, and we look forward to welcome you back soon. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much.